Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.
This review covers the Opel GT. It's a 125 scale kit from AMT number 729. Now, first released back in '69, this 2013 release came in what they called Special Original Art Series, but we call it retro packaging nowadays. It's a skill level 2 kit for the average builder, and it can be purchased in either white or yellow styrene. Now my sample has over 130 pieces, molded in yellow, chrome, clear red with vinyl tires, and a nice set of decals. Also included are metal axles and some velocity stacks. Although they're not noted on the box, it's a 3-in-1 kit. You can build it stock, custom, or drag. Now, the '68 GT was a classic sports car. It got popular because its design, which mimicked the '68 Corvette, and so it's called the poor man's Corvette. It's got a rear-wheel drive layout. It had a nice feel and maneuverability to it with pop-up headlights, and it was based on the Opel Kadett. Now, when you're done, it'll be about 6 1/4 inches long, 2 3/4 inches wide, and 2 inches high. Here are the styrene parts that you'll find in the kit, and you'll notice that there is some flash, some parting line areas, and even some attachment points that need addressing. This is a mold design from back in the '60s, late '60s, so expect to do a little cleanup, but by and large it's in pretty good shape for its age. Now the yellow pieces there are body color, and we'll deal with those later. The rest have been given a light coat of gray primer. Here are the decals, and they're very colorful. You can see the register is pretty good for the sponsor decals there, and the big gasser decals for the drag version. But I'll be building the custom body, so I'll be using those segmented stripes for my build here.
This review is brought to you in part by Riders Hobby Shops, where the fun begins.
As I mentioned, there are a lot of options in this kit, and this is one of them. This is the stock 4-cylinder engine that came as a standard power plant in the Opel GT. So I'm going to build that one for you as well, so that you can see what it looks like. If you build the stock version, you can see that you've got a simplified but fairly well detailed 4-cylinder engine. It can use a little fitting and maybe a little sanding here and there to get everything good and tight. But as it goes, it's a pretty nice rendition of the original. Here are the parts for the custom engine, and you can make the drag engine out of this base. It's a V6, but I didn't find the deep sump oil pan for the drag version, so that might be an issue if you want to build that version. You may have to use this custom one or fab your own. In any event, this one starts with the assembly of the block halves, front cover, and the heads, and I painted the motor blue with an aluminum transmission. I'll show you here the layout of the custom and drag specific parts, and once again the drag oil pan didn't seem to come on the chrome sprue tree, so I'm not sure it was just my sample or they omitted it from this boxing. I'm using the custom parts for my build, and I painted the intake and the exhaust mounts blue, and the exhaust pipes are steel. The carb is a copper color. Now I noticed on the back of the pulley assembly there was a protruding post for the alternator. Unfortunately, there's a matching post on the back of the alternator. It should be a hole there, so I just cut them both off flush and glued the parts together flush. Once you've got the basic motor built, you can complete it with the intake, the carb, the air cleaner, and then add the exhaust mounts and manifolds. Then add the starter and add the belt and the alternator, the valve covers, and then the distributor. You can see here, it turns out to be a pretty colorful rendition of I'm going to call it a street rod type of engine for the Opel GT. Here are the parts for the interior, and you'll see the drag only, the square box there around the roll bar. You won't need that unless you're building the drag car. Okay, so you just choose the interior color that works and matches your exterior, paint the seats and the interior tub, and then the outside of the tub and the front panels are flat black, as is the washer bottle. Now the shift knob, boot, and brake handle are black, and then highlight the window cranks and trim with a little silver or chrome paint. One thing that adds realism to your models is doing the floor pan in some kind of carpet look, and I used flocking for this one, and it's basically carpet fiber that's been really cut short. So what you do is you just paint the areas that you want carpeted with some white glue, and then pour the flocking on, and after it's dried you can just dump off anything that didn't stick to the glue, and you've got yourself a nice looking carpeted interior. And next I added some highlighting by painting the console black to contrast with the grays in the interior, and put a little silver trim on that. Now you can add the shifter and the brakes, and the seats go into place, and install the front panels and a washer bottle on the tub. Now we can work with the dashboard and detail that, so paint it and the steering wheel to match the interior, and the spokes on the wheel are aluminum. The instrument panel and the control area is black, and there's no decals for the instruments, so I just went out to the internet, found some gauges that belonged to an Opel, downloaded them and sized them to fit, printed them out, and added them with some Elmer's glue. I did the same thing with the radio face, and there's also probably decal sheets in the aftermarket that might suffice. Now insert the steering wheel into the column hole without some glue so that it will turn, and then install the dash into the interior. We turn our attention to the tires, and there are multiple setups depending on your build design, and the stock tires use either stock rims or rally rims, and there are 2 chrome and 2 painted black rims for that setup. The drag tires use the small custom front tires with slicks in the rear, and there's a chrome ring back and in the front, and painted rim backs in the rear. The custom tires, which I am choosing, use a big and little set with the rims from the drag setup and the rear back rims that are cut down to fit the depth. As I mentioned, I used the custom tires and rims, and I gave the tread kind of a worn look for authenticity by using a little sheet of 220 sandpaper and kind of scuffing the tread area. Now, note that, so here you see the whole chassis, and there are some issues with the chassis and the suspension, so we're going to get into those. And now note you see the axle holes here for the front and rear stock and custom setups, but the drag version has an additional set of pieces for the front suspension. So the chassis gets painted flat black, and the front pan will be body color blue in my case. Now this is the stock 4-cylinder rear suspension and exhaust. Now this shows the same suspension with the stock exhaust removed, and this is the custom 4-cylinder exhaust. Now these are the parts that we'd use for the custom build in the kit, and that's why this is billed as a 3-in-1 or even a 2-in-1, because there's no setup here for the 6-cylinder engine. And that was a leftover from one of the earlier drag versions of this kit. But we're going to make it work. Now here is the rear suspension for the drag setup, and it's different, and it includes a front suspension piece with leaf springs and a straight axle. There's no exhaust used, as they just expect the drag car to have open headers. But if you look carefully, you'll find a sprue with no mention about them in the instructions that includes a set of straight pipes. We'll be using those for the 6-cylinder custom setup. So here you see the setup that I'm going to use. That includes the rear axle for the drag car and the straight pipes on the unknown sprue and the drive line, drive shaft there. We'll be putting the radiator into place around this time, and note that the 4-cylinder unit has a radiator facing the motor, but the 6-cylinder has the radiator face the front of the car, as you see here in this second photo. And also, for a contest builder, you may want to consider cutting the lower panel, the red arrow above there, so that you can finish off of the chassis pan and the fender walls and attach it to the body. So putty and finish the body as a whole unit. Now, if needed for final assembly and strength, you could add a little strip of styrene on the inside to the bottom of the lower pan and match that up with the inside, and so that you've got a good strong joint there. And now we'll paint the chassis pan overall a flat black, and wet sand the front pan area with some fine sandpaper to get it nice and smooth, and then mask the front pan as you see here, and we're going to paint that area a body color, which is in this case blue with a clear coat. When that's thoroughly dry, install the metal axle into the front axle holes first. Then you can snap the tires onto it by pressing them onto each end until they bottom out. Now place the motor into the chassis. Now the 6-cylinder is not a good fit. It needs to be pressed into place, and I didn't try the 4-cylinder, but I'm sure it fit a lot easier. You'll need to modify the drag housing, the axle housing, because it's made to sit on top of the axle hole mounts for the factory unit. But I wanted to use those, and so I cut off about 3/16 of an inch off of each side of the axle housing. And now it'll fit in between, and we can still use these stock mounting holes to slip it in between and use the metal axle through it, and then add the wheels and tires. Now here's our fun little trick. We're going to add the exhaust for the 6 cylinders by gluing that in place on the chassis and up to the headers, and it goes out at an angle just in front of the rear wheels. Hey, here's our rolling chassis, and as you can see, they look really good with chromies and the moon dishes there. But no matter which setup you choose, those pad printed tires look great. Plus, you'll have some extras for your stash. Now you can see that there are 3 hood choices for this build: drag, custom, and stock, and they're pretty obvious. I'm going to use the custom hood, but these are all the options that you can use. Now, the custom is really meant for a 4-cylinder, but we've juiced things up a little bit. So next we're going to be working with the body, and you can see there's a little bit of parting line and flash that you'll need to clean up. Here's an example of parting line flash. It's just a slight flash there on the top ridge of the front fender. Just sand it off carefully. When you're done with the blemish repairs, go ahead and use a real fine paper like a 800 to 1000 grit to sand the entire thing, wet sand it and get it ready for painting. And here's some more fun stuff. You've got a large rear spoiler, front stone pan and wind dam there, and some side louvers over the sea window in the back. And you can mix and match, or in my case, I'm going to use them all. So all the body parts will get a full coat of primer on them, and once that's dried, you can wet sand it and rinse it off and let it dry again. Then you can paint your base color on, and I used a Chrysler Basin Street Blue. Once the paint has cured, you can go ahead and add your decals. I used those segmented stripes. I thought they were a bold statement for a custom car. And you'll need to use some setting solution for these, as they're very large, and also you'll need to place them with a lot of warm water. Then some setting solution will help them conform and to the panel lines, etc., and stick to the body. I used a silver Sharpie pen to highlight the trim, and I detailed the window moldings, front and rear marker lights, door handles, and badges. And now the front marker lights, after they've been painted silver, they get filled into the centers. The fronts are turn signal yellow, and the rears are stoplight red. Then paint the rear body panel black with a silver tail light bezel, and then clear coat the whole car. Here is the window glass, and I had dipped it in some floor polish and then let that wick off for a cleaner look. But I also cut those center bands that connect the two and replaced the rear window with some tinted acetate, a black acetate, which gives it a more of a custom look. And both of these can just be glued into place with some white glue. The options just continue with this kit, and as you can see, you get a choice between custom or stock tail lights, and you just mount them from the inside. There's a receiving hole on the tail lights, and then of course there's a pin there on the inside for the body to receive the tail light assembly there. Now we can add the interior to the body from the back to the front. Start at the back, angle it about 45 degrees, and then kind of shoehorn it down into the body. It'll sit tight there and shouldn't need any glue. With that in place, we can start looking to add the chassis. And at the back end of the interior bucket are a couple of bosses. Those are receivers for the chassis. And you see on the left, we're going to add some spacers to those pins to give us a little more wheel clearance. So glue those into place, and then go ahead and line up the rear pins, and then just carefully slide the chassis into place. Now I used a few spots of glue on the interior bottom and the front fenders, and then that will hold it into position and guide it into place. Now we'll work on the back end here, and you'll see two sets of rear bumpers, a stock set and a custom set. Choose which set you want for your build, and I used the custom ones and added my license plate. I just cut the plate out from the decal sheet, or if you made one, just glue it in place with some white glue. It's not meant to be a water slide decal. As you might expect, the grill also comes in a choice of stock or customs applications, and depending on your build, use the one you like. I used the custom grill, of course. Now you'll also find that I've added the front spoiler, the fog lights, and the sport mirrors. Then I painted the fog light lenses a clear yellow. Now add those fog light bezels and lenses to the grill, and remember you have to remove the chrome plating for the parts to stick, and then go ahead and likewise remove the plating and add the entire grill to the front end. With the major work done, it's time to peek under the hood and take a look at that engine. And as you can see, she's packed in there. That's about as much motor as you could get into an Opel GT without taking out the fenders, I guess. The four-cylinder should install a lot easier, though. Now, these are the parts that I had left over, and no matter which version you build, you're probably going to have just about as many pieces to add to your stash. Well, there you have it. Your model is complete. And while this is what you'd call a builder's kit, if you want to do something with the custom parts, it still turns out to be a real nice looking model when it's all said and done. Now, obviously, there are some issues with the kit. The parts fit on some of the things is not precise. Like the front spoiler has no location points. And the instructions are a little difficult to follow, especially with all of the options. You have to really very carefully watch which parts it's calling out for the particular build that you want to make. Otherwise, you'll get them mixed up. But after all, with a little bit of extra work and a little bit of fabricating for that lower suspension and exhaust, you can come up with something that's quite unique and exemplifies actually what used to happen to some of the old Opel GTs back in the day. Quite often they were targets for customizers, and they made quite a appearance when they showed up at the car show or at the A&W. So if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf.
Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.